much. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala khayri khalqihi wa khatami anbiya'ihi wa rusuli. Sayyidina wa shafi'ana Abil Qasim Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa ahlul qawli. Amma ba'd. In the name of God, the most kind, the most merciful, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon us all. Thank you for this very kind and gracious introduction. I got a very good training, so to speak, when I was at the Islamic Center. And my vision, Dr. Hamid, is very much has been fashioned by the time that I spent with you all at iccnc during the 3.5 to 4 years that I was there. One of the best years of my life in terms of serving a community. We are trying to get a better understanding and appreciation of Imam Ali through the lens of justice and spirituality, not the lens of politics and power. The fact that the 4.5 years of Imam Ali's caliphate was dominated by bloody civil wars and culminating with his assassination in Ramadan 661 does not mean that he was not a good or a talented political strategist or did not know how to expand his political base. The Imam indicates, as I mentioned yesterday, that he could be the most cunning, the most deceitful, the most machinating politician you could ever find. But there was something within him, and that is taqwa, that was restraining him and preventing him from committing any kind of injustice or inequity. He was bound by his noble and, virtuous ethical and moral principles that were guiding him, the Quranic values, the Quranic mode of justice. He says categorically that Muawiyah should not think that he is the most cunning. Rather, I can be more cunning than him and more deceitful than him if I were to so desire. But there are certain principles that prevents Imam Ali from doing so. That's why we see a battle between what you might call political realism, political pragmatism, and your ideals of ethics, morality, principles of justice, spirituality, and many a time these are in a clash. We saw in our recent election in the United States, the evangelical Christians, many of them were torn between what to do. Should we vote for a person whose morals and ethics we don't agree with, but we know that he's going to implement the policies that we like, that we desire as far as our religion is concerned? Let's say he is anti-abortion. And I also am, let's say, anti-abortion. So if I see somebody with whom I share this policy, but at the same time, I see that his ethical, moral values don't coincide with mine, what do I do? Should I vote for him? So there's a battle between pragmatism, what you might call the practicalities and realism of politics, and the ideals that one espouses. Imam Ali was a person who could not compromise his ideals for temporary benefits of political realism. And this is where you find the nobility of Imam Ali, and why he is so much adored by people is because he could not sacrifice these high values for temporary gains. And this is what we find in the heroic figure, who is also a tragic figure in our history, but the heroism comes from his commitment, unbounded commitment to these noble moral and ethical values. One of the problems that Imam Ali faced was that he had many, many followers who thought that they knew much more than him, who thought that they are more knowledgeable than him, who thought they are more pious than him, so that he was frequently being questioned about his instructions. He was being questioned about many of the decisions he would make, because the people around him also thought, based upon the attribute of this tribal individualism. Tribal values were again reasserting, mind you. Many of the tribal practices, the tribal norms, the tribal mindset was again reasserting itself after the death of the Prophet. And one of the places we find is in questioning Imam Ali, even though they knew about Imam Ali's distinction that I will talk about. But tribalism was once again asserting itself, especially after 25 years after the death of the Prophet. Many people amongst the followers of the Prophet remain neutral. They said, we can't decide, we can't make up our mind. Who is on the right now? On one side, we see people like al-Mu'mineen Aisha, we see Talha and Zubair, we see some of the eminent companions of the Prophet on one side, and then we see Imam Ali and some of the other companions. We just can't decide. So they become neutral. Neutrality is actually supporting the wrong side in many ways. You have to take a position. Many a times, we are passive, we are apathetic, we say, you know what, it doesn't concern me. Why should I bother about? No, it does concern us. I think it was Martin Luther King who said, when people remain silent, then you're almost encouraging tyranny and injustice and despotism. We should take a moral, ethical position to the best of our ability. Of course, if we make a mistake, we can correct ourselves. And if we are unable to correct ourselves, hopefully God can overlook our mistakes as long as our intention was pure. That is the key, is to make sure that we are making these judgments not because of our own self-interest. Imam Ali was not concerned about his caliphate. Imam Ali was not concerned about making sure that he remains in power. That's not the issue. The issue is he was trying to make the judgments based upon certain principles that are unchanging. And that's the key that we learned from Imam Ali. I mentioned to you on some occasions, Imam Ali got very upset with his followers, that he said to them, I wish I had not even seen you. I wish I had not ever come to know you. He was that upset. Why? Because of tribal individualism. People thought they know much more than anybody else. This was a tribal psychology, that if I belong to a particular tribe, then I have certain kind of commitments to the tribal values. The Imam is saying that the Quran asks you for universal values. You don't have any kind of ethnic affiliation or any kind of, national affiliation or tribal affiliation. Your affiliation is to the Quranic core values. And this is what we should use to make our decisions in terms of morals, ethics, and spirituality. On one occasion, Imam Ali says, I wish Muawiyah would exchange with me, his followers. I wish Muawiyah would take 10 of you, and then he would give me in his stead one of his, saying that Muawiyah has that kind of loyal support, even though Imam believes the direction is wrong, but you also need not blind followers, not taqlid Qur'an, but also to use our reason, to use our rationality, to use what Dr. Amiri was saying, to reflect, to do tadabbur. What the Quran says, tafakkur. The Quran is for those who are ulul albab, people with understanding and reflection. So we want both intellect. At the same time, we want people who are prepared to listen and make sound judgments. So when they see sound judgments being made by Imam Ali, they ought to follow him. They are not following blindly. They are following with understanding, with reflection, with proper understanding. This is something Imam Ali very much lacked amongst his followers. And this is the pain that you see in him. When he talks in Najul Balagha, you can see that his heart is bleeding. He is full of grief, full of anger, full of pain. Almost he's asking God, please take me away from this world. I don't want to be amongst these people. And that shows that the Imam was torn what to do. I want to lead them. At the same time, I have these kind of issues, this kind of problems and weaknesses in my followers. What do I do? So he tries to do his utmost. On one occasion, Imam Ali was mending his very old pair of sandals. It was torn. And this is the caliph of the Muslim Ummah, the Muslim community, mending his own shoes. You can't find leaders like this today, can we? And somebody walks in and the Imam says, what do you think is the value of this old pair of shoes? And the person says, Imam, it has no value. La qimatala. The Imam says, wallahi, to rule over you has more value to me than these old pair of shoes. It is more precious to me. These pair of shoes are more precious to me than to rule over you. Min imratikum illa akuna haqqan aw adfa batilan. Except that I have an obligation from God to try to establish good, to try to establish justice, and to remove injustice. That's the only calculation. The calculation is not power. The calculation is not about becoming famous. That was not the calculation in Imam's mind. The calculation is, can I promote justice? Can I promote ethics and morality? And this makes him so noble in our sight. In one other Nahj al-Balagha sermon, he says, in my view, he says, the world of yours is no better than the sneezing of a goat. It doesn't mean much to me at all. But there is this moral obligation to serve, service, volunteerism, to try to do that you can do on, as on your capacity to promote human welfare, to promote human justice, whatever we can do to promote social justice, we ought to do it to the extent that we can. The result is in the hands of God. We try our best, and then Imam is showing us after that, the ultimate conclusion is in the hands of God, but we have tried our utmost, and that is service to humanity. Volunteerism is something very, very noble. You may ask, how is it possible for people to forget many of the virtues of Imam Ali? We saw in the Prophet's time, many of the distinctions that I will relate to you. How can you forget so clearly after so many years? Well, the Quran tells us human being is very forgetful. Human being is very ghafil. He forgets, and that's why we need reminders of prophets, reminders of scriptures, reminders of the Quran. The Quran is one of our dhikr, is a reminder to us, and that's why it's constantly, we need to be reminded. We constantly need to reawaken our human conscience because it can get covered up with rust. We are all human beings. It's nothing bizarre. We are not ma'soom. And therefore, one of the key is in moments like we have, like the month of fasting, Shab-e-Qadr, we ought to again rejuvenate, revive, and reawaken our conscience, reawaken our sensibilities about morals and ethics and spirituality. And this is the moment that is supposed to then last us for the remainder of the year. But it is need for constant, you have to be constantly on guard. Human beings have to be constantly vigilant, on watch, that we don't slide away, we don't derail from the path of morals, ethics, and spirituality. And it can happen to all of us. We should not say that, if we were there with the Imam Ali, we would have been the best of followers. Well, we don't know. We truly don't know. When the true test comes, when our interests are jeopardized, Imam Ali was not prepared to compromise with anybody. For example, they would come and say, give me the governorship of this and I will support you. Or give me so much money from treasury because I'm from the noble tribe of Quraysh and I'm with you. The Imam said, no, don't speak that language. As a matter of fact, now that you are demanding this governorship, I will take away even what I had given you as a governorship because you're not worthy. I've given you the governorship of this particular city and you are saying, no, I want to have a governorship, let's say, of Iraq. The Imam said, in that case, I will even take away this city from you because you are not worthy of the trust. If you believe that I should be just handing you things out, because it's somehow your own property, then this doesn't jive with me. And the Imam takes away even that governorship. And so you find people become more hostile. I mean, if you took away power from people, I don't know, even us, we are human beings and we don't know how we would have reacted as well in those days. What are some of the virtues? Very quickly. One of the distinctions of the Imam is that when the Prophet was migrating from Mecca to Medina, he asked Imam Ali to sleep in his bed, thinking, because then on that night, the Quraysh had made a plot to assassinate the Prophet in his bed while he's sleeping. And Imam Ali is more than eager to sleep in the Prophet's bed to try to deceive the Quraysh so that the Prophet would have some more time to escape towards Medina in the night. He has no qualms. He sleeps very peacefully. This is the person who does not have any issues about the mortality of life. He's not afraid of death in the path of justice. When he wakes up, when they wake him up in the morning and they say, where is the prophet? He says, well, I don't know. You never entrusted the prophet to me. I'm here. I don't know where the prophet is, so to speak. But this was one of his distinction, is to be prepared to give up even his own soul for the preservation of the message of the prophet, the message of justice, fairness, and equity. He lived in the shadow of the Holy Prophet. He absorbed the spiritual radiation that was being radiated spiritually from the Prophet. He constantly absorbed it. He says in one of his sermons, he says, when I was but a child, the Prophet took me under his wing. I would follow him as a baby camel follows the footsteps of his mother. He was always there with the Prophet at all times, just like Lady Khadija. These were some of his solid followers and solid foundations that gave the Prophet comfort and support in the most critical time. There is a Quranic verse that talks about Imam Ali giving zakat while he was in the state of ruku. A beggar comes and says, I need zakat. You know, it is an obligation to help. But people are praying. Imam stretches out his hand that it is one should help fellow human beings. Even when we are praying, the Imam, extends his hand and signals to the person, take away my ring. And this is my contribution as zakat. And a Quranic verse comes praising him in chapter 5, verse 55, that there are people, yuqimuna salat wa yu'tuna zakat wa hum raqi'un. They pray and they give zakat while they're also in the state of ruku. The Prophet called him his brother. When they migrated from Mecca to Medina, the Prophet coupled one of the Meccan with the Madinis and said, now you're brothers, and you should now share your property with each other. And Imam said, who is going to be my brother? And the Prophet said, yeah, I'm choosing you as my brother. There's a great distinction. And people, I think, did not forget these things. But there are other values. There are other kind of, things that happen in our life that dominates. And therefore, there's a need for a reminder. Also, I mentioned the tribal values were resurfacing. This was one of the biggest calamity of Muslim history, is tribalism, again, reared its ugly face, and tribalism took over, the values that the Quran was preaching. That was one of the biggest battles the Prophet had, was to remove and uproot tribalism. You can't uproot tribalism that is, centuries old. And that tribalism was reasserting itself. And you see this in the Umayyad clan. When Uthman is in power, you see that again, reassertion of tribalism, the tribal values of individualism and self-conceit and arrogance. Now, Imam Ali also, like I mentioned, he was not prepared to compromise his principles even for his own family. So on one occasion, his brother Aqil comes to him and says, I'm in need of money. The Imam is the caliph, he has the key to the treasury. The Imam says, I've given you a share. If you want, I can give you my share, my stipend. He says, no, that won't be enough. I need much more. You have access to the public treasury. Give me from that. And of course, the Imam said, I can't do this, but wait until Friday for Jummah. So he goes, he waits until Friday. The Imam takes him for Friday prayers. And he says, listen, all these people. Now, what would you say if somebody were to betray their trust of these people who are so loyally following me? He said, well, such person would be a bad, wicked person, says Aqil. Well, Imam says, Aqil, you're asking me to defraud them. You're asking me to cheat them. When you say that you want to have a higher share from the treasury, you want to rob other people. I can't do that. Well, Aqil got very upset, even though he is a brother. But of course, when our own interests are in jeopardy, he got very upset. He goes to, and Muawiyah was very skillful in knowing when people were upset, he would be able to buy them off. So he buys him off, gives him a very handsome amount of money, and says, what do you think of me and Ali now? Muawiyah asks him. And this is the reply of Aqil. Aqil understands. His conscience is still biting him. Aqil says, I found Ali more concerned about his soul than he was about me. But I find that you are more concerned about me than you are concerned about your own soul. So we understand many of these things. But we fall into this trap. and therefore reminders are good. Imam says in one of the occasions, لو كشف الغطاء ما أزداد يقينا. Imam says, my yaqeen is so strong that even if all the veils were removed, and imagine that God can be seen. If you remove all these barriers, says the Imam, it will not add one iota, one speck into my iman. My iman is very strong. Of course, we are not expected to have that high level of iman, but we can try our best to try to at least live a life of morals, ethics, and spirituality. Society changes very rapidly. If I were to tell you that from the reign of Muawiyah, it was common to curse Imam Ali in public. It was a necessity to curse Imam Ali in the Friday khutbah. They would say the khutbah is incomplete without cursing him. What would you say? Well, it happens. This is part of history. Human beings are flawed creatures. We have a lot of deficiencies. And the same Imam that I gave you all this distinction, that same person was being cursed, and not just cursed. They said the prayer is incomplete. Your khutbah is incomplete. So this is the phenomena. Our history, therefore, when you read history, you have to be very careful. Who is writing this history with what agenda? What purpose? What are some of the axes they have to grind? If it is somebody who was patronized by the Umayyad dynasty, you have to be very careful what you're absorbing. Many of our own historians as well have said things that are completely wrong because they were so passionately Shi'is, they made up stories too. For example, all this business about cursing the Sahaba is completely against Imam Ali's instructions. Cursing the Ummul Mu'mineen is completely against the instructions of the Quran. But many of these Shia scholars, they were so passionately in love with Imam Ali that they were saying, oh, you should go and do these things. And that's why Imam Ali says two kinds of people. I conclude. I want to make sure that our next speaker, Dr. Danashgar, has also time. Imam Ali said two kinds of people are going to destroy themselves. People who love me in excess, muhibb qalin, they are ghulub, they are loving me in excess. That means if you go into the other extreme and say, oh, because of Imam Ali, I will curse so and so, the Imam says, even you will be destroyed. And the other person who will be destroyed is somebody who hates Imam Ali with passion. Both these groups, the Imam says, are going to destroy themselves. Therefore, we have to find a balance. You have to find a balance and make sure that we create harmony and love and friendship between our Sunni brothers and sisters with our Muslims all the time. This is how the Imam would have behaved. Did you know Imam Ali married the widow of Abu Bakr? Asma bint I forget now, bint Umays, I think. Imam Ali married the widow of Abu Bakr. Imam Ali adopted the son of Abu Bakr, Muhammad, as his own son. You think if Imam Ali had that kind of hate that we say for Abu Bakr and Umar and so on, Uthman, you think he would have adopted his son as his own son? He said, Muhammad, you're my own son. He married his widow. He called his son, one of his sons, Umar. He called one of his sons, Uthman. These are facts of history. And therefore, we need to be very careful. The Imam is saying you can destroy yourself if you love me in excess and you go on the other extreme, you become radicalized. There also is something that is not possible, says the Imam. So my message is, let's try to cultivate harmony, peace, and love and compassion with all of us, with all of humanity, especially amongst our Muslim brothers and sisters. When I hear about the bomb that are being detonated in mosques, killing Shias or Shias killing Sunnis, it is simply, for me, it's something unimaginable. And if you are followers of the Quran and the Prophet and the Imam, this is not possible that it can happen. And therefore, that's my message for all of us, inshallah wa ta'ala. And I thank you very much for listening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.